Welcome to Represent NYC, presented by Manhattan Neighborhood Network. Represent NYC is your opportunity to learn how elected representatives and city officials are tackling the issues that impact your community and your life. I'm Robert J. Rodriguez, current New York State Assembly member in the 68th Assembly District of East Harlem. I'm born and raised in East Harlem and a proud resident of that community for generations. And as a close-knit community, we know that most recently, on March 12, 2014, our community was hit hard by an unexpected gas explosion which brought down 2 buildings, killed 8 people, injured over 70, and displaced 90 families. 60 small businesses were slowed down, cut off, or shut down altogether. Today's show is our chance to hear from those directly affected by this tragedy and to talk about what needs to still be done 3 months later by those close to the situation and how we can best help. We'd also like to touch base on the best ways to prepare for these situations in the future and prevent them ultimately from occurring. So here to share their stories today are 2 individuals who were affected by the explosion in different ways. Diana Wilson is a resident of 1652 Park Avenue who lived next door to the explosion and whose life has been turned upside down because of the incident. Dimitri Gatanas, who is the proprietor of Urban Garden NYC, a garden center located directly in front of the devastated buildings. Both of you, thank you for joining me here today. So we'll start with Diana. Tell us a little bit about your experience after the explosion.
I was on my way to work and just dropped off my daughter Jade to school. My oldest daughter was home. As soon as I got to work, I got a call from my daughter telling me that there was an explosion. She actually was sleeping at the time, and one of our windows exploded and cut her in the back of her legs, gave her bruises and cuts, and I tell her, get out of the apartment. She picked up the cat, got out of there, and I left work and returned back to my neighborhood to see what was going on. So.
And what did you see when you were there?
It was crazy. Nothing before I left, actually, we walked right by the building, my daughter and I, and we did smell the gas. Didn't know where it was coming from, but we continued to, school and work. And got the call, came back, and to see the building was already halfway down, and people were all over the place crying. So it was just an experience that I wouldn't want to experience again.
I mean, I've lived in East Harlem my whole life. We've been there for at least 2 generations, and in my recollection, I can never recall something, so devastating. I mean, surely we've had building collapses and a fire here or there, but nothing of the scale of destruction that I think we've seen and experienced, as a result of this explosion. I mean, 2 buildings completely decimated. Lives have been lost, and there was an ongoing fear, right, after that, about how this could happen, and how we could prevent that. Right. One of the things that came out of this experience was our office initiated a hearing with Con Edison and some of the other gas providers to ask some questions about the infrastructure. There have been some preliminary reports from NTSB about how they think this might have occurred. But one of the clear indicators is that the gas lines under there are 100 years old. And it's not uncommon in either New York City or other parts of the state for parts of the gas infrastructure to be that old. So we held a hearing and we had some discussions about how long it will take to replace this stuff. And based on our current progress, it'll take somewhere in the area of 30 years to replace these gas mains. So I think that's one of the things that we are looking at on the state level to potentially change. But more important is as we look for ways to prevent this in the future, is we're still dealing very much in the present. So going back to the discussion about how you have seen things happen since the explosion in terms of recovery efforts, and how you're dealing with getting your life back on its feet in one sense, and ways that the community has been helpful and we can continue to be helpful. So how have things been?
Well, we're back home, and
that's how long did it take before you were able to get back into your home?
Well, the explosion happened on March 12th, and we were out for about a month and a half, maybe a little less than a month and a half. Came back in April, more end of April. We got back into our apartments. Apartments were not fully repaired, but they did want us to get back in there. So we got back in there, and
Tell us a little bit about that. When you say they're not fully repaired, what was the condition of the apartments when you were asked to return, or when
Okay.
you were able to return?
yes, we still had our everything that was damaged. We came home to damaged furniture, damaged wall. The wall, the doors were exploded. No gas, nothing to cook. So, dust everywhere. And this is how they wanted us to come back home like that. We came back home, we cleaned, but it's still no gas. We can't cook to this day. Have a hole in my wall because they did replace the pipes, but they haven't, replaced the hole on our wall. So they covered it with paper and tape. And that's what, that's the condition that we're living in right now. They gave us a stove, one of those little hot plates. When it works, it works. When it doesn't, it doesn't. We have to order out almost every single day. So, that's expensive.
And there are certainly, in your building, I think that, that we've gotten great responsiveness from the management and from the owner, but we have also heard my office from other folks in other buildings that have less resources, where even less has been done in terms of getting those apartments up to a proper livable condition. And in fact, some of the residents in a neighboring building have sued their landlord because of lead and dust and conditions that are almost uninhabitable for young people, particularly people who are impacted by asthma, as some of the kids in those apartments are dealing with. So we have seen a variety of different responses from the property owners in terms of getting the apartments back into shape. But I think what's important for people to take away is that we're in June, and we're still very much dealing with the recovery efforts in terms of the residents and getting these apartments and your homes back into a condition that works. And I know one of the things that we have been active on is making sure that the residents receive some support from the Mayor's Fund and some of the resources that were put in place by the city. Can you speak a little bit about that and your experience with that?
Okay, so my experience with that, we got help from certain organizations, and then some not much, but like Safe Horizon, that's one that helped us out, and they helped us in the best that they could for each family. So we were able to, they provided each family with a grant. To each and every family receive something different in the dollar amount.
Yeah, based on the amount of impact that they've
exactly.
had. And Con Ed has also been responsive in
And
terms of initial grants.
Yeah, they in the beginning, yes, they did, and they supplied us with cleaning products and the hot plate, and they helped us in the best they could also. So. I guess, between the both of them, they're the ones that came forward for us.
No, I think that's
in
important.
my experience, they're the ones.
Is that we did see resources come together, and I think the challenge is that there's never enough resources to fully cover everyone's need.
Right.
And I think that has been, one of the difficult things that we have heard in terms of the office and in terms of getting people on their feet, is that, people have either different abilities or resources that are personally available to them to kind of weather the storm, and those who have less resources have needed more help than others, and from the fund, and sometimes those resources were available and sometimes they're not. But I do want to thank certainly the mayor and those organizations that contributed to the fund for at least recognizing that this was going to be a difficult process, and hopefully the viewers will recognize that we're still very much dealing with recovery, and more resources are needed. So any additional support that can be provided is certainly appreciated by the families. I think let's switch a little bit and speak a little bit about the businesses. And this is one area where, as we talk about the resources that are available for the victims and the residents, we have certainly heard that there are fewer resources available to the businesses recovering. So, Dimitri, let me take the opportunity to introduce you, and maybe you can share a little bit about what your experience as a business owner right across the street from the explosion. How has that been for you? Well, where were you on that day, and how has it been? How did you find things, and then how has your road to reopening been?
Well, I mean, this is something that you just don't wake up in the morning and think you're going to experience. Particularly us, we were under a train track, in between lanes of traffic. We never expected that this would be the calamity that would be upon us. So the morning of the explosion, I was preparing for a meeting. I was going to get to work a little late because during the winter we're not very busy, and I had a 10:30 meeting at my garden center. And I get a call around 9:30 saying that the store exploded. I just couldn't believe that how a garden center could explode. But when you would turn on the TV, all you did was see smoke, rising from under the train track. And as information was slowly coming along, we realized that the buildings exploded. We didn't really know why, and there was a lot of rumors about what may or may not have happened. But it literally looked like a war zone. I mean, it was just sirens and smoke and vehicles on fire. It was just, and this is all, of course, I'm watching this from a television set. My staff, I had about 6 staff there that morning. They were frantic and confused and concerned, but none of my staff got hurt. They had a little sort of a interesting thing happened. We have a chicken coop on the property, and somebody threw a chicken over the fence, thinking that it would land in the coop. Somebody was donating a chicken, I guess, to our coop. And when they walked into the property, somebody said something's flapping above the chicken coop. And as they walked over to take care of the situation, the explosion happened. Mm-hmm. So they missed the explosion by feet, and some of them were full of the dust. It reminded me a lot of 9/11, what you saw on TV. Mm-hmm. And when this happened, this was our property that we rent from the city of New York was ground zero for the investigation, the NTSB investigation. It also acted as a place for all the emergency service people to set up and coordinate the rescue effort, and eventually coordinate getting the place back to normal. So we were out for about a month.
That was the question. How long were you out of business immediately, after the explosion?
Well, we were literally out of business for a month. But post that month, and as we were able to get back into the property, we had real issues. We had a fence that wasn't there anymore. We had all of our inventory literally scattered everywhere, broken and what have you. None of the live plants weren't able to be watered. We literally were just like starting all over, except we started with a rubble-strewn lot instead of a clear, open piece of property. So, and springtime is a really important part to our business. In fact, we do most of our sales that time of year. So I felt like I had no place to turn, and it felt very, we were really concerned, a little vulnerable. But with the support of friends, family, and amazing customers, neighbors, and the city agencies and elected officials, that we were able to put ourselves back together rather quickly. We were able to look seemingly fully operational by sometime late April, early May.
Wow.
And we had no choice. It was really something that we had to it had to be done, or we would be in big financial trouble.
So that's almost 2 months potentially of a business that's impacted. Obviously, you're not able to bring in much revenue, if any, at this time. On the contrary, you're probably spending at this point. How did you do it? And I mean, we've talked to a number of the business owners, and we know the challenge has been, it hasn't come from insurance. Con Ed may have provided an initial grant, but it's probably nowhere near covering, what you have to now put together to either repurchase inventory, repair your, your location, or just get back on, in terms of, feet and expenses and getting things going. So how have you done it? And one of the things that we'll mention is what support has been available. But I mean, I think we have heard mostly that, a little bit of the grace of God and a lot of family, friends, and borrowing. But tell me your experience.
Yeah, no, that's pretty much it. I mean, you learn how to dance rather quickly in a situation like this, and we literally we skipped and hopped and ducked and did whatever we had to do to get ourselves back into business. But it was a time period where everybody was banding together, and I felt from vendors to customers, new customers that never existed before that found out about our story. They came to just to come up and support the opportunity to get us back into business. So, all that good-natured stuff and a little bit of, I guess, street smarts and business smarts or business savvy, we were able to put ourselves back together. But it's going to be, this is going to last for a long time. We're not expecting this to overcome quickly. And there's also the stigma that we're trying to make sure that doesn't exist. We want to see a real positive, we want 116th Street and Park Avenue to be a positive place, not a place where tragedy is and things like that. So that's important to us.
I think that's, there are two important things that you mentioned and that I felt was particularly strong. When the explosion happened, I was up in Albany and I raced down. I mean, I haven't gotten so many calls like that, and sometimes you don't know how to take them. There's an explosion. Is it big? Is it little? What's the scale? What's the scope? You turn on the TV, you see destruction, and you're rushing back home to check on your family and your friends. And our office is right around the corner on 115th Street. Right. So, we had staff members who were walking to work and barely missed it. And in a sense, where sometimes it's better to be, lucky. And the fact that it happened after people are heading to work and after people have sent and gotten their kids to school means that we were able to hopefully avoid additional loss of life. But there are still a number of issues around getting back. But during that time, there was this tremendous sense of people coming together, looking out for one another, checking on your neighbors. Are they safe? How can we help? The efforts around the Red Cross and the recovery in the first days were fabulous, and I think we were good to at least have that initial support. But I really felt that since then, we've continued to grow stronger as a community in terms of trying to take care of one another. And you can tell me if you guys have experienced that, either in terms of neighbors, but also in terms of businesses. And then we'll go back to, how do we continue to get back on our feet on the business side? Mm-hmm.
Well, the neighborhood, first of all, we got ourselves back in business. Mm-hmm. And I think that really helped a lot of people feel like things were normal, because the more you see shuttered businesses or boarded up windows on apartment buildings, the more that stigma exists, and that brings a negative sort of culture to the community. So being in business, supporting our neighboring businesses to be in business, supporting whoever we could support amongst the community, that's what gets the place back up and running. And I think that's what's going on now. I mean, there's still people that are displaced, there's still people that are in financial dire straits, but the majority of the people, life continues.
We push on.
Yeah,
we push on.
Exactly.
We're resilient, and we know how to be, survivors when we have to be. Exactly. And I think that was one of the senses, is that we feel like this is, not going to hold us back. And one of the great slogans that have come out of this, and I think the proceeds of the T-shirt sales are going to some of the victims, is El Barrio Fuerte, which is, as East Harlem, we are still strong, even even after something as difficult, tragic, and devastating as this. So talking about the businesses, we know the certain ones are not back because their buildings are not structurally sound enough for them to come back, and then we also know that people have really struggled to piece together the financing to be able to reopen. I think in speaking with some of the business owners, the property owner is, if you're in a storefront, is responsible for pretty much the facade, but any other damage is on the business. Unless you have insurance, that is probably the right kind of insurance that was perfectly tailored for something like this, there's not much relief coming from insurance. You can tell me about your experience in terms of whether or not insurance has been helpful, but I know one of the things that has been made available was emergency SBA loans. And just to give folks an update, these are low interest loans by the federal government. For the property owners, I think it was a 2% loan. For the business owner, it's a 4% interest loan. And up to date, I believe 25 businesses have applied, and at this point, they're still in some part of the process, so 25 have not been approved. So it means that money is not yet in our communities and not yet helping out the business owners. And anecdotally, when we talk to some of the businesses, they are waiting on their insurance checks, if they are qualified to receive claims. So many people are piecing this together in extraordinary ways. And that was the primary thing that came through our door immediately after from the businesses. So what we've been working on for the last couple of months has been creating a forgivable loan grant program for the small businesses. So to date, we have commitments from the state and from private funders for about $400,000 to begin filling the gap for where businesses have not been able to get any support, beyond the support you get from your insurance and beyond whatever support you get from Con Ed. How much of the expenses can we, that have incurred as a result of this explosion, can we help out with? So that's the purpose of the program, and as I mentioned, it will be structured as a forgivable loan. If you happen to get, settlement proceeds, or 20 years from now, you win your lawsuit against whoever potentially you could be suing, and you want to pay it back, great. But we know that you need the help now. Right. And that it's unfair for people, in particular some of our businesses, to take on more debt as a result of something that was really outside of everyone's control. So I just wanted to update people on what our office has been doing, and working with the Empire State Development and Harlem CDC and UMES and some of the other partners about trying to bring some relief to the businesses in this corridor. And I think to your point, Dimitri, about revitalizing this area, we're going to have to, one, help our businesses so they can reopen, and two, is remind people about the good things that are happening in this 116 corridor, all the way from the East River all the way to Fifth Avenue, to make sure that we bring people back up, right? Exactly. Because our streets have been closed for months, in the immediate vicinity. We have some great restaurants who are fighting to reopen. We've got the Urban Garden, NYC, who has, who have been providing gardening services to our community for decades, back on its feet. So we want to make sure that people understand that, and I think part of the support that we'll be enlisting is from the city and from our other partners is we need help marketing East Harlem and bringing traffic and business back to our community. So in addition to helping out the businesses, we need to make sure that we do that. But you have some exciting things going on as well, Dimitri, in terms of a memorial and ways that we can remember this, move forward, and kind of celebrate our community at the same time. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, we, of course, there was a lot of debris on the property, and there was some debris that didn't get picked up from the cleanup. And the cleanup, thanks to the Economic Development Corporation, they were instrumental in helping us out, and the small business services were instrumental in helping us out getting the place clean. But there was a couple beams left over, and pretty heavy beams. One of them was a metal beam. And it sat there on the property. It caused a lot of destruction on our property. And what we decided to do is we're going to take this beam and plant it, because there are these amazing holes that they're perfectly available for planting. And we're going to create a memorial on the outside of our property, facing the buildings that exploded. And we want to create sort of like a perpetual flame thing, like some perpetual planting that will resemble the destruction, but also at the same time create a little bit of a sense of calm for the people that see this. And we're going to have the names inscribed on the beams, and it'll be available for people to view from inside our shop or from outside the shop. And we just think it's important to remember this episode of our lives. I mean, we were all impacted severely. So to do something positive without any funding, without any hoopla, without any, just using this stuff that we have right on hand, I think that's going to be an amazing display. And we hope to have it ready soon. We're just waiting for the street to be paved.
Great.
Yeah.
And coming back to the residents, Diana, what do you think we can continue to do to help in the recovery efforts?
All the tenants have to stick together. We need to have our tenant meetings. So far, we haven't had any,
Okay.
but we are talking about getting everyone together and just continue fighting.
Well, we're going to be with you in that fight.
Continue fighting for our rights.
One of the things that we're going to continue to work on is we know that the challenges from that initial month in terms of coming back in have been very difficult, and we continue to work with the city, and the state has committed as a partner to try and fight for an additional month of rent abatement for those who are being impacted. It's a challenge that you're coming back, you're not in really livable conditions, and you're having it's not easy to get back there, but we're still required to pay full rent, even though you're certainly not getting full services. So we'll continue to fight with you on that front, and we'll keep people updated on our progress in our efforts. So I want to take this opportunity to thank both you, Dimitri, and re-enlist our support to help the businesses along the 116 corridor, and you, Diana, and of course you have our continued commitment to help the residents in any way, shape, or form that we can to help our community and our neighbors get back on their feet. And I want to thank you for taking the time to share your experiences.
Thank you.
These stories will hopefully help build a better future for our community. And for more information on this subject and issues related to anything that we've spoken about on today's show, please call my district office at 212-828-3953 or email me at rodrigrj@assembly.state.ny.us. Also, you can always visit or write my office at 55 East 115th Street, New York, New York, 10029. And make sure you can always follow me on Facebook and Twitter. So once again, I am Assemblymember Robert Rodriguez, representing East Harlem El Barrio. Thank you for tuning in to Represent NYC on Manhattan Neighborhood Network.